Hello, everybody. It's Tyler with 3D Printing Basics. If you guys were interested in getting every single episode of this podcast, 3D Printing Basics, ad-free and a week early, and also getting exclusive perks such as exclusive episodes that only you can listen to and more, then subscribe on Patreon. My link will be down below. I would really appreciate it if you guys would consider supporting me. All the support I've already received has meant the world to me, so thank you guys so much. If not, no worries. Continue to consume these episodes for free, and I appreciate you listening regardless. So thank you guys very much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Hello, and welcome back to 3D Printing Basics. This is episode number 108, and in this week's episode, we are going to be talking about bed leveling. I know nowadays there's a lot of printers out there that have automatic bed leveling. They have their BR touches, their probes, their sensor leveling, but it's still a subject that I wanted to cover. I believe it's important, especially for those of us that have printers that don't have automatic bed leveling. It's really important that we know what to look for and also kind of what to expect. Before we get into it, I just wanted to say thank you guys for all the support. It really means a lot to me. And yeah, so let's get right into today's episode. So bed leveling, a lot of us know what it is. You know, it's very simple and it's been a very common thing in 3D printing for a long time. It's just leveling the bed. But there are definitely some misconceptions. When you're leveling the 3D printing bed, you're not making the bed flat. The print bed is the print bed. If it's got a little warp to it, then it's got a little warp to it, and it's just not going to change if you level the bed. What you're really doing is you're aligning the bed, the entire, pretty much every square inch of the bed, you're aligning it with the x-axis, because the x-axis moves back and forth, or it moves up and down, or it moves in parallel with the bed. And if you have it moving exactly in parallel with the build surface, then you are going to get a good first layer. And that is obviously the most important thing of 3D printing, is making sure that you have a good first layer. So some reasons why bed leveling matters so much is if the nozzle is too high, if it's too high on the first layer when it comes to the first layer of 3D printing, then the filament won't stick. You're going to have the spaghetti monster attacking you, and as most of us know who have experience with it, that is not fun at all. I would argue that's probably the least fun thing in 3D printing, is cleaning up that spaghetti monster. And then you're also going to have gaps in your first layer, and if you have an inconsistent first layer and you're running a really long print, something maybe more than 12 hours or so, it is unlikely that it's going to print successfully. It might detach from the build plate. It might completely let go. You just don't know what's going to happen. So that's why if you have it too high, you're going to have those issues. If it's too low, then you run the risk of the nozzle crashing into the bed, which can definitely happen. You can have it scratching the surface, so it either messes up the build plate or it messes up the nozzle itself. I definitely had a couple instances where the nozzle was dragging on the build plate and it actually closed off the open end of the nozzle. It scratched it, or it was too close to the bed, scratched it too hard that it eventually kind of pounded it shut, and then that created a huge nozzle clog, because obviously there was nowhere for the melted filament to go, and it completely blew up that hot end. So you can have that, your filament gets squished, and then you have essentially the same problem with an inconsistent first layer. You can have, parts where it doesn't extrude at all. You can have parts where it extrudes very little, and overall you just aren't going to get a successful print. And that is probably why bed leveling is the most important, because bed leveling kind of ties in with the first layer. If you don't have good bed leveling, you're not going to have a good first layer, and if you don't have a good first layer, you likely aren't going to have a good print overall. So that is why it is very important, if you are manually leveling, or even if you're automatically bed leveling, then to make sure that everything looks good, and that's why you want to watch that good first layer come down. If it's correct, if you have the correct amount of distance between the nozzle and the build plate, you are going to get a smooth first layer. You're going to get really good layer adhesion from the first layer to the build plate, and you are going to overall have a better chance at getting a good print coming out. It's pretty simple. I just wanted to go over it, but it's pretty simple and pretty logical there. The first layer, it really does decide the rest of the print. You can't really have a good 3D print if you don't have a good first layer. So it's definitely something that matters a pretty good deal. So, the most common method we're going to go over with the manual bed leveling. So if you have the automatic bed leveling, if you have the probes, or if you have the sensors like a Bambu Lab, generally it's pretty straightforward and pretty automatic. There's not much that you usually need to do. I've seen printers like my old Elegoo Neptune 4 Plus that had the mix. It had the BL Touch, but then you also had to manually level it. I don't think there's a lot of printers out there that have that, so we're going to stick with just straight manually leveling it. So we're talking, the Creality Ender 3s, printers like that have no BL Touch system whatsoever, and you're just completely manually leveling it. Normally, they do have their own leveling command, so a spot on their screen or just a command that you can run. Usually what that's going to do is it's going to take it to the four corners, and on each corner is going to be where the spring knob underneath the bed is. So for those of you that don't have it, essentially a manual print bed is going to be screwed down with some springs attached, and that is going to you can turn the knob underneath. You turn it one way, it raises the bed. You turn it one way, it lowers the bed. And so you're just going to go corner to corner, and you're going to take a piece of paper, whether it's an index card, a normal piece of paper. You just want to make sure it's not something too thin like a receipt or some Bible paper. Just a normal sheet of paper is going to work just fine. And you're going to kind of move it back and forth under your nozzle as you are tightening it, raising it, or lowering it, whichever works for you. And you want to make sure that the index card can slide, but you want to feel a little bit of resistance. So you don't want the index card or the piece of paper that you're using to be underneath the nozzle and be trapped. That's going to be too close to the bed. But you also don't want it to be moving completely freely under there because that's too far away from the bed. And yes, I know it's very finicky. We're talking about, 0.1, 0.2 millimeters here, but that really is a difference between getting a good first layer with proper bed leveling and getting a bad first layer with inconsistent bed leveling. So you want to feel just a tiny bit of resistance, almost like it's scratching the paper just a little bit. But you should still be able to move it. Like I said, it shouldn't be trapped. So once you get that, you want to make sure you get that in all four corners, and then usually it goes to the center and the exact center of the build plate, and then you can test it out there. I wouldn't worry too much about the center of the build plate as long as it's close, because in order to adjust that, you kind of have to adjust all four corners. In my experience with the manual print leveling, if you have all four corners good, then chances are the center is going to turn out very well, just because if you have some inconsistent bed leveling, you want it to be in the center of the print, not in the corners, because the corners and the edges are obviously going to be the first to lift up or detach from the build plate and then get you a not successful print. If you have a little bit of inconsistencies in the center, then that is going to be okay as long as the outside edge or ring of the print that you're trying to make is looking good. So once you're going to be able to do that, you have all four corners. You're going to want to do a test print. Most printers have a setting for this. If you don't have a setting for this, you can just print something like a couple layer thick square that's like 2 layers thick and runs along the entire build plate. And for that, what you can do is you watch that first layer, and then most printers have baby steps, so you can baby step the nozzle up or down depending on the build plate. And honestly, it's pretty obvious to tell if your nozzle is too far or too close to the build plate. You're going to see obvious under extrusion. None of the lines that are being 3D printed are going to be touching each other, and that's a big problem. If you can see gaps through your first layer that's being laid down to the build plate, then the nozzle is too far away. You want all the lines to be touching so that you have good layer adhesion. And then if it's too close, you're going to see that it's not extruding as much as it should be, and then there's going to be wisps and lines and zits everywhere. It's like I said, it's going to be pretty obvious if something is wrong, and if something is going good, it's going to be pretty obvious. If you can, see a nice layer adhesion, you're not seeing any gaps in between the lines that it's laying down, everything looks good and everything has solid adhesion, then your bed leveling is going to be good. And then you can just proceed with the rest of your print, and you shouldn't have to do that for a while. I would say for my manual prints, when I was running them, for my manual printers where I had to manually level them, I was probably leveling the beds maybe once every 20 or 30 prints or so. And that was back in the day when, the Ender 3s were like in 2020 when they were not fantastic build quality. I would say the build quality for the printers that you're going to have now that have manual bed leveling are going to be pretty good, or definitely better than they were. So I don't think you're going to have to manually level it as much, but that is definitely something that is personal preference for you, and just something that you should watch and look at. If your first layers are starting to become inconsistent, maybe one side's higher and one side's lower, then you should probably do some bed leveling to get everything back to where it is. But that is kind of the overall process that you're going to want to go through. It's a pretty straightforward process, and overall making sure that you get your bed leveling as good as you possibly can to get that successful first layer, it's going to be the most important thing. So now that we know exactly how to level our bed, I wanted to go over some common beginner mistakes. So mistake number one is going to be leveling with a dirty nozzle. And this isn't exactly, it can have a little bit of stuff on it, but you just want to make sure that the bottom of the nozzle is clear. You don't want any old filament stuck to the tip of the nozzle or stuck, just close to the tip of the nozzle, because that could really interfere with your bed leveling. Obviously, if you have something that is not the nozzle sticking to it and that's getting in the way of the paper test, then you are going to have some issues there. Another thing is going to be not heating the bed or the nozzle first if your printer recommends it. I know I didn't do it with my Ender 3 back in the day. It just made things a little bit easier, but definitely, since your 3D printer most of the time is going to be running with a heated bed, you are going to want to heat the bed because the build plate, it changes shape when it's heated up, right? It tends to flatten out. It tends to, it changes shape. That's all I can really say about it, is it does. When it heats up, it's going to be a different shape than when it's cooled down. So in order to get the most accurate results, you're going to want to be heating your bed up at the very least. Just make sure you're careful when you're touching it and doing the paper test. Make sure you don't burn yourself. Another mistake is going to be only checking the corners once. If you have the spring bed, it's known for being pretty inconsistent. So when you go around the four corners, when you get to that fourth corner, your first corner might have shifted a little bit. So you want to make sure you go at least twice, if not 3 times, around all four corners of your bed, making sure that, micro adjusting, making those little adjustments, making sure that nothing shifted on your last time around until you get to the point where everything is looking pretty consistent on the last turn that you're taking around the bed, and that way you feel pretty confident that everything is consistent and in a pretty good place. Another mistake is going to be ignoring the Z offset. So the Z offset is what I was talking about earlier with the baby stepping your nozzle up and down. That value gets saved and doesn't really change unless you manually do it for most of these printers. So you might have a nozzle that has a Z offset for your last bed leveling. You might have moved it up a little bit when you were re-leveling everything, making sure that your bed is level, but you didn't change the Z offset. And so now your print is going to come crashing down into the bed. You're going to scratch the bed, mess up your nozzle, all of that good stuff. So you want to make sure every time that you are bed leveling that you reset your Z offset, and that goes with that first layer, that first layer test when you're running after you re-leveled your bed. You're going to want to make sure that you reset your Z offset, and then that's when you're baby stepping it up and down. That's when you're resetting that value, and that's really important. And a lot of people forget to do that because it's just not something that's kept super in mind with the Z offset, but it's definitely something that is going to be very important, and make sure you keep an eye out for that. Because that's just one of those things that you can easily forget about, but it can actually wreck your printer before you even get a chance to start it. Another mistake is going to be trying to level the print bed when it's not actually the problem. I know I struggled with this on my Prusa 3MSs, I believe, or the i3 MKSs, sorry. I had some build adhesion issues. I thought the build plate or the bed leveling was a problem. Prusa had kind of an automatic one. You didn't really do anything. The build plate was fixed, so you couldn't really adjust it. You just ran the bed leveling, and I was doing that before every single print to no avail, and I was getting super, super frustrated until I figured out the real problem was that I was cleaning my build plate with acetone instead of isopropyl alcohol. And obviously, acetone is not going to be the right thing to clean your print with. It pretty much takes away all the tackiness from your PEI build sheets. You never want to use acetone when you're cleaning your print beds. I know for Bamboo Labs, it's recommended to use just soap and water. I use IPA and it works just fine, but you do that at your own risk. It recommends detergent or soap and water, so I would recommend doing that to get the best possible results. But that is definitely a big problem. If you're manually leveling your bed and you're still having issues with it not printing correctly or having poor first layer adhesion, even though you've tried everything, you definitely want to try cleaning your print bed, because that is a bigger problem than most people think. Even if it looks clean just from you touching it, the oil from your fingers getting on the build plate can completely take away its stickiness, and it's able to hold on to the prints that you're printing. So that is definitely something that is very, very important. And like I said, you're going to know you're dialed in when you're watching that first layer and everything looks good. You can't see in between the layer lines to the build plate, and everything just looks right. And then when you're running your print overall, if you're running it for a couple hours, you notice none of the corners peel up. There's no kind of warping. Nothing is popping off the build plate. Everything is staying nice and stuck down and just looking good throughout the duration of the print. And that's how you're going to know that you've properly leveled your bed. And with that being said, that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode and learned a little something about manually leveling your print beds if you have a printer that does that. I know not everybody has the Bamboo Labs, which is the automatic first layer, perfect every single time. And so I wanted to make this episode to show you that you can still get that great first layer just with a little bit of work. So thank you guys so much for listening. I appreciate all the support I've been getting. It really means the world to me. And I'll talk to you guys next time.